Well, we started this series last week, the book of James. Actually was not intended to start last week. It was supposed to begin this week, but some things came up, and my father-in-law was actually supposed to preach last week, but he woke up sick, and so I went ahead and started the sermon series last week, which worked out just fine because what I originally planned for week 1 was verses 1 through 8, and then I got through writing verse 1, and it was already sitting at about 35 minutes, so I thought we better leave the rest of the verses for another week. So it worked out just fine. Here we are. We're going to be spending most of the summer here in the book of James. When I first started playing guitar, I think most everybody in here knows that I play guitar. In fact, this is actually my guitar that gets used around here most Sunday mornings. When I first started playing guitar, there's this thing that happens to every guitar player, and if you've ever even picked up a guitar, you'll understand what I'm saying. It hurts your fingers really, really bad. You're putting pressure on a finger, pressing down on a metal string that is bridging the gap over more pieces of metal, and then it's wood underneath that. It hurts. Your fingers, you don't realize it, but they're not really made for that kind of thing from the factory, right? We don't have what we need for that. But as I continued playing, one of the things that had to happen was that I had to play through the pain. I had to keep going, and what eventually happened was that these calluses built up, and I know that like we think of calluses, like calluses on your hand, like that's hard work. Calluses on your feet, that's gross, and you need to shave it off with a cheese grater. But calluses on your fingers from playing the guitar, you really have to have those. And I don't play nearly as much guitar as I used to, so my calluses are not built up like they used to. So the once or twice a year that I get up here and play guitar, my fingers actually hurt pretty bad. If I would practice more often like Eric does, like Donovan does, maybe I'd build those up again, but right now I don't have much there. But building those calluses is just one of these things that happens as you play through the pain, as you keep working forward with your goal of getting better. You build the calluses up. Other things that happens, you start developing some muscle memory on how to play chords. At this point in my life, I can play any chord on the guitar without having to look at my hands to see where my fingers need to be at, because I've built that up. Over time, the skill gets developed, and eventually what happened was, for the first time I picked up the guitar, the only thing I could play was Smoke on the Water, to eventually, now I can play chords, I can put together songs. If you put a piece of music in front of me, I can probably play what's on there. But it took time to get there. It took, honestly, a little bit of pain to get there. It took some resiliency to get there. It took some hard work to get there. Well, this is kind of how trials are. Trials are difficult. None of us wake up on any given day saying, I hope the Lord will take me through a trial today. Nobody says that. Nobody wants that. But unfortunately, it's just a part of life. But what we recognize is that through the trials, if you are a Christ follower and if you are looking at the trial the proper way, through that, something is happening. It's not just this incident that is random. It's something that the Lord is using. And now we could go over all kinds of different theology on does the Lord cause it or does the Lord just redeem it after it happens? And truth be told, I think sometimes there's a little bit of both. But what I do know is that during a difficult season, during a difficult trial, something is happening. You're being built up. You're being strengthened. There's some skills there that are being developed, and eventually you're able to be the person that God has created you to be. And so as we read through James chapter 1, verse 2 through 8, we're going to recognize a few things. That this is, you might have if you're sitting there with your Bible, it may have a headline above it that says, testing of your faith, or trials, or count it all joy, or something like that. Mine says testing of your faith, and that is something that I think happens a lot during trials. And so the first thing that we recognize is that trials are just a part of life. Like I said, none of us really want it, but it's just part of life. It's as sure as taxes and death. Trials are going to come. James chapter 1, verse 2 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." Now, if you have a translation that says, "if you meet trials of various kinds," you've got the wrong Bible. The scripture is very clear. It's a when thing. It's not an if thing. It's a when thing. I would suggest that everybody in this room has already experienced some sort of trial in their life, maybe minor, maybe major. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to accept that difficult seasons are inevitable. They're just a part of life. They're going to come. No matter what we do to try and avoid it, no matter what we do to try and manufacture just this prosperity type of thing in our life, at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, we will have gone through some trials. It's just part of it. And in fact, I think that we have to recognize one thing, that Jesus actually promised this. And so if Jesus promised it, that it's going to happen, even if it's not a good promise, even if it's not a promise we like, if Jesus promised it's going to happen, we have to believe that it's going to happen. He said in John chapter 16, verse 33, "I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And in the context, one of the things that Jesus is getting at is that actually, because you are committed to Him, because you have surrendered your life to Him and said, "I'm going to live for Him no matter what," because of that, sometimes the trials come at you with even more force. Sometimes they come at you with even more regularity. So I know that's not very encouraging, but what is encouraging is that He says, you can have peace through this. And He says that you can take heart because I have overcome the world. And so one of the things that we got to do with trials is just recognizing this idea that it's going to happen. And so we need to have a game plan for that. We can be prepared for it. We don't have to stick our head in the sands and act like nothing will bad ever happen to us. We can be prepared for it, knowing that at some point something bad is going to happen to us. I think of the 2-minute drill in football. If you watch much football, every team has a 2-minute game plan. And what it means is you're getting down towards halftime, or you're getting down towards the end of the game. You've got 2 minutes left. You need to score, or you're going to lose the game. Or you need to score to go in, to go in with more points at halftime, or whatever it is. And they practice this every week. Every football team practices their 2-minute drill. They're running almost the exact same plays, almost the exact same way, throwing the ball to the exact same people, doing the exact same things, trying to get it to where, okay, if we get in a situation where we're down by 4 points with 2 minutes left to go in the game, we know what we can do, where more than likely we are going to score a touchdown so that we can win the game. Now, no team goes in hoping that they're down when they get to 2 minutes left in the game. Last night, I watched the Oklahoma City Thunder just fight their tails off trying to win in a Game 7. They didn't do it. They weren't able to get it done. Nobody goes in hoping that they are going to be down with 2 minutes left in the game, but sometimes it happens, and so you have to have a game plan, and that's why these professional athletes get paid millions of dollars to do what they do, because they're often successful in their 2-minute drill. I know that nobody wants for trials to come. Nobody, like I said, nobody wakes up hoping for that, but we cannot deny the reality that they do come and they will come. Unless you're at the very, very end of your life, you're probably going to face more trials. We cannot control the timing. Usually they come at really inconvenient times. And we cannot control the intensity. It's almost always more intense than we want it. But we can control our preparedness, and we can control our response. And I think that our response and our preparedness comes kind of with the rest of these, of how do we look at trials? How do we step into this? Well, one of the things is that we can recognize that trials build maturity. It helps to build us up. Verse 3 says, "For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." So something happens when we go through a trial. Something happens to our faith. When our faith is being tested, it produces something in us. James says it produces steadfastness. Now, the Greek word there is upomene. Upomene. And I know that's probably something a word you guys use an awful lot. But other translations, other times that Greek word is used in the New Testament, sometimes it uses the word endurance. It builds endurance. Sometimes it's more of a verb form. It's the word remain. So you stay. And then another word that has been translated in the New Testament, and I like this one, is loyalty. It produces within us the ability to be resilient, the ability to be committed to something, the ability to be determined. So once again, we don't want to go through the trial, but one of the things that's happening is when we get to the other side of the trial, we've actually learned how to be resilient. We've learned how to be committed to something. We've learned how to be loyal to something. We've learned steadfastness. Steadfastness is part of the perfect, complete, lacking in nothing process that he used. It's sorry, I don't know what that is. One of the things that I thought about that happens, some of you also know, if you don't know these things, you're learning a lot of things about me today, that I like to build furniture, woodworking and furniture. And I think about the things that you start off with a tree, right? Like every piece of furniture at some point was part of a tree, or it was a tree. And so I think of all the things that it has to go through to get to like the coffee table that is out there, or some of the other pieces of furniture that I've built in our home. You can't just take a tree and throw it into a living room. I mean, I guess some people can figure out a way to do that, but it's got to go through some kind of milling process. And so you think about it, it's got to be cut down, it's got to be milled down, then it's got to be straight lined, it's got to be ran through all these different machines and everything. And then in some cases, there's what's called steam bending, where you'll take a piece of straight wood and you'll put it in this box that is specially built that just pumps steam through there, gets it really, really hot. It's really, really steamed and all that. And then when you pull it out, it's real pliable, so you can bend it, but then you have to put clamps on it to put pressure. There's this decoration thing that my wife's grandfather built years ago, and it's a Christmas sleigh coffee table. I know that sounds weird, but like it looks like a sleigh, but it's flat on the top. It's a coffee table that they use only at Christmas time. And it's got steam bending. He took these pieces of wood, and they were straight, and it bends around and curls to the top. Now, that only happens because of the pressure that was put on it. And then at the end, it's this beautiful piece of furniture. Or maybe you're not doing any steam bending or anything, but you're running these piece of wood through a kiln, heating them up really, really, really hot just to dry it out, get rid of any bugs, get rid of any diseases or anything like that. It's not fun, I assume. I wouldn't want to be put in there. This is not like a trees or people save the trees type of talk. I'm just saying, like, you put this stuff through a lot of pressure to get it out, to make it something beautiful. Well, that is sometimes what it takes for us, is sometimes we have to go through pressure to become what God intended for us to become. That's one of the things that happens with building maturity. Trials will lead to maturity if we will let it. Another word there he used was, and let steadfastness have its full effect. Now, I don't really know how we would not let steadfastness have its effect, I guess just with our attitude. But James says, if you will let steadfastness have its effect, it will lead to maturity. It will lead to some growth. If we will allow God to complete what he's trying to complete in our suffering, it will lead to maturity. So if we accept that trials are a part of life, and if we accept that it's doing something, we can go in from the beginning with the mindset of, okay, what is God trying to build in me? What is he trying to do in me through this season? What is he trying to produce through me, in me, and for me because of this season? The next thing we see is that trials are faced with God-given wisdom. He says there in verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Now, I think that's one of the verses that we tend to just pull out and read it in isolation, and it probably rings true no matter what, but we have to recognize that this is coming right on the ends of consider it pure joy when your faith is being tested. So what James is specifically meaning here, what he's specifically saying here is when you're going through this really difficult season, ask God to give you wisdom, and he will give it to you. We don't face any trial without guidance. To Christ's followers, that is. And we need to recognize that if somebody who's not a believer, somebody who's not a Christ follower is going through a difficult season, they don't have access to God-given wisdom. They may have access to some other kind of wisdom. They may have access to worldly wisdom, but they do not have access to God-given wisdom. That is only for his children. That is only for Christ's followers. And God does not want us to go through trials alone. That's another thing that we have to recognize. When we're taken through a trial, our Father in heaven is not sitting there saying, I sure hope they don't ask for my help. I sure hope they want to walk through this alone. I mean, think of yourself. If you are a father, if you strive to be a father someday, think about that. Like, I don't want my kids to have to go through any difficult trial on their own. I want to be there to guide them, to help them. Now, sometimes that guidance and that help, it looks a little different than what I might want it to look like. Sometimes I might be going through a difficult season, a difficult trial, and I wish God would just come down and just take care of it. But maybe that's not what he's trying to teach me in that moment. But he will offer wisdom in every season. Psalm 23 verse 4 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This Psalm of David is he's saying a lot of the same of what James would say several hundred years later. There are difficult seasons, but God is with us. And part of the way that he is with us is in wisdom. When I was growing up, we had a couple of rent houses. In one rent house we had in particular, it was a crawl space, and it was not a very big crawl space. And we had a pipe that burst underneath there. And at this point, I was probably 13 or 14, and my dad was not about to crawl under that crawl space. But he paid for me to be alive. So I got to crawl into the crawl space while he sat out with a flashlight. But it was to fix a leak in plumbing, which I had never done in my life. He had done a number of times, but he couldn't fit under there. So he sent me, and the whole time he was telling me what to do. Here's what tool you need to use. Here's where you need to cut. Here's how you need to put this slip thing in there. I don't even know what it's called anymore. I haven't seen one since then. I thought this would be a skill that I would need a lot more in my life, but so far it has not proven to be true. But he guided me the whole way through. Now, as a 13, 14-year-old on a Saturday morning, I can assure you I did not want to wake up that Saturday morning and go crawl underneath the house in a bunch of mud replacing a pipe. It wasn't on my radar for a fun activity for a Saturday morning. But I had to do it anyways. We may be called on to go through some difficult circumstances. Like God might actually have something for you that is a difficult season. Maybe he just responds to difficult things in some situations, but there also may be some seasons where he actually has ordained for you to go through a difficult season. But we don't have to go through them alone. We're not called on to do it alone without guidance. God will give us wisdoms. Sometimes, though, he doesn't let us see everything at one time. I think a lot of the time we will pray, God, will you just give me the big picture? because I'm walking through this difficult season. Will you just give me the big picture? Let me see exactly what it's going to be like on the other side of this so it's okay. But sometimes he just wants to help us through one step at a time. Sometimes that's to see if we trust him, to see if we're going to be faithful to him as he is faithful to us. And I like to think of it like a flashlight versus a spotlight. You got a big spotlight, you can shine it out over a field and see everything that's going on there. A lot of time a flashlight, you can only see a few feet in front of you. So sometimes that guidance that he offers is going to come in the form of a flashlight. He may not let us see the big picture, but he will let us see what's right in front of us. How do I deal with this obstacle right here? How do I navigate this thing right here? How do I make it through this moment right here? On to the next, and on to the next, and on to the next. When we only have a flashlight, we have to believe in faith that God is giving us what we need at that moment. He knows what we need more than we know what we need. Even though we might think that we know exactly what we need, he absolutely knows what we need, and that's really the point of his guidance. And the last thing that we see here in James chapter 1 is that trials are an opportunity to have extreme faith, or to exercise extreme faith. So, but let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways. When we ask for wisdom, we should have faith that God actually wants to and has the power to provide it for us. Now, this, again, is one of those scriptures that if we pull it out of context, it will mess us up. Because we may ask for something we really, really want in faith, and then maybe God doesn't give us that big pay raise we wanted. Or maybe he doesn't heal that person we wanted healed. And we look at James chapter 1, verse 6 and say, well, I asked in faith. Or we look at that and say, well, I must have not had enough faith. We need to recognize what he's talking about. When you ask for wisdom, all throughout the Bible, God has promised to give us wisdom. And so when we ask for wisdom in faith, believing that he actually wants to do it, believing that we actually believe what the Bible says, he will give it to us. And so let's not take this out of context and make it something it's not, but let's also know that when we ask for wisdom in faith, we should have faith that God actually wants to and has the power to provide it for us. I think of it like this. Let's say that it's coming on summertime. Let's say I wake up at my house this summer. It's already 95 degrees. It's 8 a.m. It's hot. And I go to my air conditioner, and it is not working. Now, I have two options here. I can look at it and try to figure it out on my own. And here's the deal. I really have no confidence whatsoever that I'm going to be able to fix that air conditioner. Or I can call Ben and Nick. And I have full confidence that both of those guys know exactly what to do and can get the job done. When we ask God for something, we're asking the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present God. We can have full confidence that the God who created everything by the voice of his word, the God who empowered his Son, who empowers us to do incredible things, the God who raised from the dead, we can have full confidence that when we ask for wisdom, he possesses the wisdom to give to us, and that he loves us enough that he wants to give it to us. We must ask in faith. We must ask with confidence. We don't ask for wisdom from outside sources that we don't believe, that we're not confident in. We ask God being confident in him. We can have confidence that with any trial, the wisdom needed will come from him. And James says the one who doesn't have faith is like a person whose heart is divided. This person wants to honor God in the season. He wants to be faithful to God even through this difficult trial. But if he doesn't have faith, he's not really accomplishing anything, and God's purpose in the trial isn't being fulfilled. I don't want to be considered a double-minded person who speaks out of both sides of my head, who operates out of both sides of my mind. So let us have extreme faith during seasons of turbulence. Let us have extreme faith when things are going on, not in ourselves, but in God, who wants to give us wisdom to navigate through those seasons and wants to bring us to the other side. And so I don't know what trial you may be in or what you've come through, and I certainly don't know what trial you may be coming up against, but I know that we have either two choices. We can either stay stuck in the mire, we can just say, I'm going through this, and I'm just going to stay here and wallow and cry and woe is me and all of this. Or we can believe that God is doing something during that season if we'll let him do it. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16, Paul touched on this also. He said, "So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light and momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." Paul says, I know that this is hard. I know that you hate it. I know that this is not what you expected, but don't lose heart, because something is happening. This thing that you're going through, this really, really heavy thing, it's actually light and short compared to eternity. But you're being prepared for something. The glory that will come your way, the glory that will come is heavy and it is eternal. So don't just look at what's right there in front of you. Don't just look at the thing that's going on right now. Look at the big picture. Look at the things that you can't actually even see right now. Believe in faith that God is moving through this moment to get you to that day. Because those things will never perish. Those things will never go away. And church, I believe that if we will take this mind and attitude into our suffering and trials, we will face them with dignity, and we will face them in a way that God wants us to face them, in a way that will produce what He is trying to produce. It will produce maturity. It will produce wisdom. It'll produce faith. It'll produce a testimony. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make during trials is that we spend all of our energy trying to escape the season instead of asking God what He wants to do during the season, what He wants to teach us during the season, what He wants to produce through the season. And I understand why, because trials hurt. Disappointment hurts. Grief hurts. Waiting hurts. Confusion hurts. Betrayal hurts. And pressure hurts. Nobody volunteers for suffering. Nobody says, I'll go through it. I'll do it. Pick me. Nobody's signing up for that. But James is teaching us something that is important here. Trials are not meaningless for the believer. They're not wasted seasons. God has something going on, and He's doing something through them. The pain is real. Nobody's denying that. Nobody's suggesting the pain isn't legitimate. But the purpose is real and legitimate also. And the danger is not just in the trial itself. The danger is going through the trial the wrong way, missing what God intended to do, becoming bitter instead of mature, becoming cynical instead of faithful, pulling away from God instead of leaning into Him. James says, let steadfastness have its full effect. In other words, don't interrupt the process. Don't try to manufacture something to get out of this. If God is building endurance in you, let Him build it. If God is strengthening your faith, let Him strengthen it. If God is teaching you dependence, let Him teach it. If God is producing maturity in you, don't run from the very thing that He's trying to use to shape you. because some things can only be produced in pressure. There are depths of faith that you will never discover in comfort. There's wisdom that you will never learn in a time of ease. There's perseverance that you will never develop if life is always just simple. And maybe some of you are in that place right now. Maybe you walked in this morning carrying fear. Maybe you walked in carrying exhaustion, maybe frustration, maybe grief, maybe disappointment with God because life has not gone the way that you thought it would. I've had those conversations before. I've been real honest with God before and said, this is not what it was supposed to be. Why are you doing this? And today, God is not necessarily saying, I'm going to remove that from you immediately, but He is promising, I will be with you the entire time. I will guide you the entire time. And if you trust me, if you'll let me guide you, if you'll let me be with you, if you'll let me mold you and shape you, I will use this season for my glory and your good. That's why Paul could say, do not lose heart, and recognize Paul, he didn't have an easy life. He had a pretty easy life before Christ, but after Christ, it was in and out of prison, getting flogged and thrown out of cities just to go back to the same place and do it all over again. He didn't have an easy life, and he said, don't lose heart. Why? Because even when the outer man is wasting away, even when everything that we can't control, everything about us, maybe our health, maybe our circumstances, maybe our situation, maybe our financial standing, whatever it is, when all of it is wasting away, when it's all going through this difficult time, something deeper is happening. God is renewing you. God is shaping you. He's preparing you. He's maturing you. He's producing eternal things through temporary suffering. So we don't go through trials pretending they don't hurt. We go through trials believing that God still has a purpose in that moment, in that trial. So when the trial comes, don't waste it. I think the way that we waste it is by spending all of our time just trying to get through it, or just trying to see why is this happening, or just trying to wallow about it. But what if instead we didn't waste it? What if we did not let it drive us away from God, but we let it push us toward Him and into His purpose? So when you're in a trial, ask Him for wisdom. Trust Him one step at a time. Have faith, even when all you have is the flashlight instead of the spotlight. And when you come out on the other side, you'll realize that what felt like was breaking you was actually building you. Is actually strengthening you. It's producing steadfastness. It's producing wisdom. And ultimately, it makes you look more like Jesus. Because He suffered. And He asked His Father for help. And He believed that His Father would do whatever He could. So whatever season you're in right now, go through it in the way God intended. With endurance. With wisdom. With faith. And I'll add this, go through it with praise. I think sometimes we show up to church and we might approach the worship music and say, I'm just not feeling it this morning. Well, that's when I would encourage you to lean into that praise even harder. During seasons of difficulty, we have a choice to make. We can praise, we can worship, we can honor God even when we're not feeling it, when we don't feel like it. I think maybe that is sometimes the most difficult time to lift your hands in sacrifice to God, in honor to God. But it's during those moments where I think we need to praise him the most, where we need to lean into that the most. So that's what we're going to do here. And maybe you're going through a really difficult season. Maybe your life is awesome, but you just want to be prepared. In whatever circumstance you're in right now, let's spend some time worshiping this morning. Let's pray together.